Commission now resumes its sitting.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. We have the Attorney General.
Yes, that's Attorney come in. I didn't see.
I hereby do.
Mr. Attorney, could we have your full name, address, and affiliation?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, other commissioners. Mohabir Anil Nandla.
Would you give your address?
Sorry, 2829 Lama Avenue.
What happened? I beg your
Lama,
Lama.
L-A-M-A.
L-E-M-E.
L-A-M-A. Lama Avenue, Bellier Park, Greater Georgetown, Guyana.
Hillier Park.
Greater Georgetown, Guyana.
Road
And
officers.
you are the Attorney General of Guyana.
Yes, ma'am.
You
And Minister of Legal Affairs.
and Minister of Legal Affairs, I beg your pardon. And you have given a statement in this matter,
Yes, ma'am.
and you signed and initialed that statement.
Yes.
And if you see that statement, will you be able to recognize it
Yes, ma'am.
by your signature?
Yes, ma'am.
A document is going to be placed in your hand.
This is the statement I made and signed.
Might this be admitted, Commissioners, as NAN1? I do have copies for you, which I will pass up shortly.
Man one.
Yes.
Yes, okay.
And for ease of reference on expedition, I'm going to ask the Commissioner's permission to have the original in the hand of the witness.
Yes, please.
Thank you very much.
Now, sir, you are a member of the Central and Executive Committee of the People's Progressive Party Civic,
That's correct.
and this party is normally referred to as PPP/C.
That's correct.
And did you serve as a member of Parliament for the PPP/C from 2006 to now?
That's correct.
You told us earlier that you are the Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs. Did you previously hold this office?
Yes, ma'am, I held that office from the 5th day of December 2011 until on or about the 15th of May 2015.
Between 2015 to August 2020, were you a member of Parliament?
Yes, I was.
And were you a member of the parliamentary opposition?
Yes, I was.
At that time, or during that period of time, were you also the legal advisor to the leader of the opposition?
Yes, I was.
as party legal advisor, were you required to advise the party on all constitutional, legal, and electoral matters?
Yes, I was.
You are aware of the terms of reference of this commission of inquiry?
I certainly am.
So I just want to take you back a little bit, not too much, but I want to take you back to a particular event which led up to the March 2nd, 2020 elections. Follow? So do you recall the 22nd of December 2018?
Very clearly.
And very briefly, if you can, tell us what occurred on that day.
On that day, in the National Assembly of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana, a no confidence motion lodged by the then opposition leader, Mr. Bharat Jagdeo, was debated and passed against the sitting government.
Now, this having occurred, could you tell us whether there were certain constitutional consequences for Guyana?
The Constitution of Guyana, by virtue of Article 106, provides that if a government is defeated by a no confidence motion in the National Assembly, then the President and his cabinet shall resign, and the President shall fix a date for elections to be held within 3 months from the date thereof, unless Parliament grants an extension to that 3 months period.
Well, let's take it one thing at a time. This having occurred, did the President resign?
On the night when the no confidence motion was passed, the Prime Minister held a press conference in the precincts of the Parliament and declared what the consequences are of the no consequence motion and committed that his government will comply with those constitutional consequences. But to answer your question, no, the President did not resign, the Cabinet did not resign, neither was a date fixed for elections within that 3 months prescribed time period, nor did Parliament extend that period beyond 3 months.
Apart from what the then Prime Minister said at the press conference, because this inquiry's terms of reference tell us we are to look at GECOM. Can you tell us whether any statement was made by GECOM when this occurred?
Well, naturally, once elections become imminent, GECOM has the crucial role to play under the Constitution of conducting those elections, which necessarily means that GECOM has to ready itself and its machinery to undertake that very important process. So everyone was looking at GECOM at that time, knowing what the constitutional consequences of a successful no-confidence motion was. The CEO of GECOM, Mr. Keith Lowenfield, CEO meaning Chief Elections Officer, made a very important pronouncement, almost contemporaneous with the passage of the no-confidence motion. The no-confidence motion was passed on the 22nd, and on the 27th of December, the very month, just a few days after, a public statement emanated from the Chief Elections Officer informing that GECOM will and can ready itself to hold the elections within the constitutional time frame of 3 months.
And did GECOM adhere to that commitment?
No, a few days after that, the then government attempted to go to the parliament. When they went to the National Assembly, attempted to get the speaker to somehow reverse the no confidence motion. That was unsuccessful. And from that moment, when it became obvious that there was no other option but compliance with the Constitution, GECOM's public narrative began to derogate fundamentally from that commitment of readiness, and they began a narrative that they will not be ready, that database that will have to produce the
Okay,
list of electors.
just
not
pause,
ready.
just pause.
Sorry.
So let's clear it up. So when you say, I understand the context in terms of time. When you say began a public narrative, how did this occur? Was this through statements by the CEO, press releases?
Statements from the CEO, press publications, because journalists began to probe and ask questions. Us in the opposition, we started to ask questions as well, and these were the answers that were coming out of GECOM, that suddenly this state of readiness and this commitment to be ready dissipated. And what came out, to the contrary, was that time was needed to do an entire new registration process, that a new database had to have been created, that the list of electors will not be ready for a very long time.
Understood. Now, from the evidence we have had in this inquiry, we know that at the top of GECOM we have the commissioners, and then we have a secretariat put in place to carry out GECOM's work. So when you talk about these things being said and done by GECOM, are we talking about persons from the secretariat? Can you recall?
I'm speaking principally. Permit me to explain briefly for the benefit of the commissioners, and pardon me if you have this information already. GECOM is structured in a peculiar way. The commission, you have a supposedly impartial chairman and 3 commissioners representing opposition interests and 3 commissioners representing government's interests. And the impartial chairperson has a casting vote. So naturally on a question like this, you have division in GECOM. So the information that I'm referring to was largely coming from the chairman at that time, retired Justice James Patterson, and Keith Lowenfield, the Chief Elections Officer. Perhaps with your kind permission.
No, let's press on. We can get back to that, but I want us to get some facts out of the way. Now we are still on the no confidence motion. Was there a legal, because you told us about the parliamentary challenge to the no confidence motion, was there a legal challenge to the no confidence motion?
Yes, a legal challenge was launched, purportedly by a citizen, against the validity of the no confidence motion. Several rounds, I don't need to go through that.
Sure. And to which level was it litigated?
That challenge was litigated all the way to our apex court, the Caribbean Court of Justice, and on the 16th of June, I believe, June 2019, the final pronouncement came from the CCJ upholding the validity of the no confidence motion, and in relation to the constitutional impact, the court unfortunately restrained itself from making coercive orders, but made it very clear, coercive orders against the executive, justifying that on the basis that these are fundamental players in the constitutional dynamics of Guyana, and it is expected that they will behave with due rectitude, but made it clear that the consequence of a no confidence motion being successfully passed is absolutely clear in the Constitution.
So,
And it requires
based on what you've told us then, the CCJ having made this clear, and you having told us what the Constitution provides, at this stage, and we're talking about mid-2019, did the then President and Cabinet resign?
No, they did not.
Was a date fixed for an election?
No.
By this time, was the chairman of GECOM the same James Patterson about which we spoke?
No. Almost simultaneous with the ruling from the CCJ in respect of the no confidence motion was a ruling from the CCJ again in respect of a challenge launched against the appointment of James Patterson. This appointment was made by the President unilaterally, although the Constitution requires him to select a name from 6 names submitted to him by the leader of the opposition. Coincidentally, the opposition leader submitted to him 18 names, and he rejected 18. 6 submissions were made, 3 submissions of 6 names each. And for the first time in the history of that provision being there 30 years, all 18 were rejected, and the President did the extraordinary thing of making a unilateral appointment, which power can only be exercised by a President when there is no submission made by a leader of the opposition.
Correct. So I just want us to just have some information on the record. Now, you referred to the fact that that appointment had been challenged in the courts.
Yes.
And is it correct to say it was litigated right up to the CCJ as well?
That's correct.
And is that the case of Zulfikar Mustafa?
Zulfikar Mustafa against the Attorney General.
The Attorney General of Guyana. And that Zulfikar Mustafa, about whom we speak, is now the Minister of Agriculture who testified before us this morning, correct?
Yes, and he is also the Executive Secretary of the People's Progressive Party, a position he held at that time as well.
Yes.
I'm in charge of all matters of agriculture in Guyana.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Now, I want to take you to the 31st of December 2019.
So did I say that the appointment was vacated by the ruling of the CCJ?
No, you didn't.
Can I put that on the record? The appointment of James Patterson was vacated by the Caribbean Court of Justice in its ruling in Zulfikar Mustafa, confirming that the appointment was unlawful and unconstitutional.
And I'm sure the Commission can take notice of this judgment of the CCJ. Will you be able to provide the Secretary with a copy?
Once the Commission permits me, every case that I refer to, I will produce the judgment and lay it over with the Secretary.
Thank you very much.
So I took you to the 31st of December 2019, and I asked you about whether you recalled that date. Do you recall it?
31st of December 2019, certainly.
Yes. What occurred on that day?
After 1 year of constant struggle and intense pressure, President Granger eventually issued a proclamation required of him under the Constitution and fixed a date of 2nd March 2020 for the holding of regional and general elections in the Cooperative Republic of Guyana.
And I take it the PPPC began preparation for those elections?
Yes, we did.
How you participated in those elections by virtue of the fact that you appointed one of the assistant election agents for the PPPC, correct?
That's correct.
And this was for Region 4?
That's correct.
And you had been appointed by Mr. Zulfikar Mustafa.
Yes, he was the election agent for the party.
Can you now recall which part of Region 4 you were responsible for?
I was assigned responsibility for that geographic expanse on the east coast of Demerara, beginning from industry and ending at Cane Grove.
Now, in your witness statement, you say that you can cite numerous examples of the CEO making decisions which could have created an electoral advantage in favor of the APNU-AFC when compared to other contesting parties. You also give an example in your statement. Would you tell us a little more about that?
Certainly. The appointment of polling places fall under the omnibus responsibility of the chief elections officer. GECOM had developed a policy over the years of the avoidance of using private residences as polling places. And in fact, they had produced a handbook or a manual, if you wish, that informed on this process or on these matters. And it stated that private residences would only be used in the rarest of circumstances when you can't find a public place. In fact, they even made a preference of using an empty lot of land where they would erect tents, etc., rather than a private residence. Now, the way, for example, the east coast of Demerara is populated, many of the villages do not have public buildings or do not have sufficient public buildings that can be used for polling places that would meet the voting demographic of that particular geographic configuration. So, applying that principle, you had a paucity of polling places, and you had, and that paucity of polling places would have certain impacts.
Okay, could we just pause? Now, you tell us about villages on the east coast of Demerara. At that point, did the PPPC consider that these were areas which constituted, as to use political terminology, strongholds?
Yes.
So to go back to what you were explaining to us, what that would mean is that there will be fewer polling places
That's
for
correct.
these areas and these voters.
That's correct.
And what would the necessary outcome of that be?
It would mean that an area that has thousands of voters would have very few number of polling places. The result being that you will have hundreds of voters lining up for hours because they have to vote at very limited polling places. People will be exposed to the sun, to the rain, etc. People may become disenchanted, and they may just decide not to come out to vote. Also, the location of these polling places may not be in central parts of the village. So one person, or a large number of persons rather, would have to travel large distances, long distances, to exercise their franchise. And when they arrive there, you have a long line of people, and that can have impacts. When you engage in practical everyday politics, you know how difficult it is sometimes to get people out to vote and to get them to stay in the line, etc. So, and then the other important part is that GECOM, by the location of some of these polling places and the way they structured, or rather assigned the list of electors to these polling places, when we checked it on the ground, it translated into PPP stronghold areas being requested to come out of those villages and vote in other villages which are not traditionally considered to be PPP stronghold areas.
And did you and the party have a concern about that?
Certainly, because Guyana has an unfortunate but peculiar history of hostilities at election time between the two major political parties. And locating PPP voters in that environment caused us great concern. We raised it several times with the chief elections officer, but to no avail, until we were able to establish in Georgetown, doing a comparison. Georgetown being the capital city, an urban center, obviously would have a large number and does have a large number of public buildings. Yet, I was able, and my other political colleagues were able to photograph many private residences being allocated or identified as polling places in Georgetown. And this was so...
Pause just a second. Had this occurred before?
It may have, I'm not sure, but it was not as pronounced as it was in this election.
And having recognized this, did you also bring this to the attention of the CEO?
I drew it to the attention of the CEO, I drew it to the attention of the press, and it was widely publicized.
Did the CEO provide you with an explanation for this apparent disparity in the treatment of voters?
Well, he first cited the policy to which I made reference earlier, and I had to point out to him that that policy is only applied in certain communities and in certain geographic areas. Because I had 3-4 instances right around where I live, where they were public buildings and they did not use the public buildings, but used private residences instead. So I was telling him here, the policy is not only being applied in the breach, it's completely being ignored.
Did he correct the situation?
We had a lot of exchanges before. Eventually there was some positive reaction. That entailed us, along with 2 consultants that were stationed within GECOM for the elections.
Were these 2 consultants Commonwealth election experts?
Yes. They accompanied a team from GECOM, a team from the People's Progressive Party, and they decided to invite a team from APNU as well. And we went into the villages that we claim were affected, and we walked the villages to show first of all, the distance, the volume of population, and where the centers were. One village, for example, had 8,000 possible potential electors to vote at one polling place.
When was this walkabout done?
The CEO eventually replied to us or responded to us in a positive way just days before the elections. In fact, I recall distinctly 72 hours before polling day, we were in certain communities in the night, that very evening, looking for spots, empty lots, to locate tents election day so that people can vote, because there was no private public buildings, and they maintained strenuously that they're not going to use private residences.
Sure. Now, this team that went to the villages, did it include the returning officer for District 4?
It included Mr. Claymont Mingo, and the team was headed by Mr. Keith Lowenfield himself.
Now, I'm not going to take you through what occurred at Ashman's building, let's say, from...
But I did just, with your kind permission, just conclude that point that I was
Sure.
making, that matter was resolved. The polling place issue was resolved up to the day of the elections, up to the day before. So the day was tomorrow, tonight we resolved. We're still in the afternoon, still resolving that. What that meant was that thousands of people did not know where they were voting hours away. And when you were in practical politics, that has serious consequences. because people don't know where they will have to go, and you know, it can break their spirit and cause them to just not turn up, create
Certainly,
severe
that's-
apathy.
It has the potential to dissuade people from voting, correct?
Yes, very much so.
So as we are moving on, I'm not going to take you to the events which occurred at Ashman's building unless something pops up. But I want to ask you about the 5th of March when legal proceedings were filed by Riaz Holiday. Could you tell us something about that?
But I've been following the commission, so I know you have a...
One moment.
Page 4, paragraph 18, Commissioner.
I wonder if I can ask a question.
Sure, of course.
Several witnesses who testified before the commission said that Mr. Mingo appeared to have been making a declaration, but many of them, as I recall, said they couldn't quite hear what he was saying, but it looked as if he was making a declaration. So my question to you is, you say this declaration was challenged in court,
Yes.
correct? What was the evidence used to satisfy the court that he in fact made a declaration? Or was it that he never denied that he made a declaration?
It was not contested that he made a purported declaration. In fact, those who were championing his cause wanted it to be believed that it was a proper declaration.
But should I ask you, Mr. Attorney,
Yes, sir.
was the declaration reduced into writing, and was it tendered as an official document to GECOM? By your recollection, if you don't remember.
No, there were papers. I personally have not seen the declaration in its construct, in its printed construct, but I know that it was at some stage of the process submitted to the Chief Elections Officer. Later in my testimony, I advert attention to it being used along with the 9 other declarations at one point in time by the CEO in a purported report to the Commission after the recount was concluded, and the CEO was refusing to use the results generated by the recount. In one installment of his refusal, he purported to submit as part of his report Mingo's declaration.
Thank you.
Just to go along the lines of the questions posed by the commissioners, I want to ask you this. You were there at Ashman's building during
Yes.
that period of time, and you are familiar with the Riaz Holiday matter.
Yes.
Was Mr. Mingo an affidavit in this matter or any other matter?
Yes, Mr. Mingo would have filed affidavits in all of our matter. The matter was fully ventilated.
Sure. And did in those documents, was there any denial of the fact that he had made a declaration?
I do not think so. The case proceeded on the basis that that was not a contested fact.
Did
The
this...
legality of it was
Sure.
obviously under focus.
Let's flesh this out a little bit. Are you able to produce a copy of the proceedings in Riaz Holiday to the secretary so that the commission might be assisted by
Yes,
it?
certainly.
What I would also ask you is this. After Mr. Mingo is heard speaking, but it appears as though not everyone was able to hear him, did the CEO or anyone from GECOM advise the public or give the public any information to say that no declaration was made?
No. quickly after that event, Holadar was able to obtain a court order or court orders that impacted how events would have unfolded thereafter. An injunction was granted.
Sure. Did anyone from GECOM, let's say, contact your party to say that, listen, no declaration was made by the returning officer for District 4?
As far as I'm aware, no formal document was received by my party.
Or was any communication made to that effect?
Not as far as I'm aware.
Did you see anything in the newspapers from GECOM saying that there had been no declaration by Mr. Mingo?
Not at all. You see, the same day that Mingo made the declaration was the same day Holadar obtained those orders. They were hours apart.
Yes.
So not much could have happened. But I'm answering your question. No formal.
That's nice.
Yes.
Thank you, AJ. So eventually, Holadar had gone to court to restrain GECOM from using whatever Mingo had said in Ashman's building on the 5th as part of their process, correct?
By the time we reach to the court with Holadar's application, Mingo had already made a declaration. Fortunately, we had some orders there that, one, prevented GECOM from accepting that report or acting upon the report, or any declaration made by GECOM, or any results declared by Mingo. And we also had some mandatory orders seeking to compel Mingo to comply with the tabulation, with Section 84 in respect of the tabulation.
The pronouncements were made the same day of the application by the court. Is that
Yes,
correct?
sir. Yes, sir.
Yes.
Mr. Attorney, we have heard this gentleman named Mingo apparently made more than one declaration. The declaration you were speaking of is a declaration made on the 5th of March.
Yes, sir. On the upper flat of Ashman's building.
Do you have an idea of the time?
That declaration would have been made sometime about 2 p.m., sometime around that time, if I'm not mistaken. Because we were before the judge at about 2:33 p.m.
And we've heard also evidence that at the time the gentleman named Mingo made that declaration, a significant body of votes for District 4 had not yet been tabulated.
That's correct, sir.
Thank you.
So if we can just take a step aside for a moment from talking a bit more about the 5th of March, there had been an incident, had there not, involving certain ballot boxes on the night of the election.
Yes, sir.
And you had brought that information to the attention of the returning officer, Mr. Mingo.
Yes, ma'am.
Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
So, elections night, I received information that a geographic area that falls under my supervision as assistant elections agent, that the presiding officers had instructed that certain statutory documents which were supposed to be put into the ballot box were being put in an envelope separately and being sent off to Mr. Mingo, the RO, under the said procedure. That was not the normal.
Well, that was not the correct
That was not
process
the correct.
according to law,
That was
correct?
not the correct process.
Yes.
So it was happening in a particular area. I was told about 40 odd ballot boxes were affected. So I immediately made contact with Mr. Mingo And he told me that he will get back to me. To his credit, he did, quite efficiently. And he informed me that he is aware of the issue, that there was some breakdown in instructions at the level of his DROs in that area, and they had ill-advised the presiding officers. However, the documents are coming to him, and he will ensure that they are put in the right place. I asked him whether he has informed Mr. Lowenfield, his supervisor, and he said yes. In fact, he just came on the phone with Mr. Lowenfield before he called him.
Before we go into Mr. Lowenfield, I want to ask you this. Did he confirm with you at any later stage that those envelopes had been received?
Yes, in a subsequent conversation, he confirmed to me that he received those envelopes and he has passed them over to Mr. Lowenfield.
Right. So let's go back to Mr. Lowenfield. Did you have any dialogue with Mr. Lowenfield about this matter?
But yes, I had, at the recount at the Arthur Chung Convention Center. The AP and UAFC began to make these documents an issue. After that night, I felt that Lowenfield accepted that the documents were in his receipt. Mingo accepted that there was an error and they received the document, and there was an undertaking that they would fix the problem. I did not think about the problem anymore. I thought that that problem was adequately and sufficiently addressed. Until when the recount started, and they began to make this now an issue, that statutory documents are missing from the boxes.
They who began to make
The APNU, sorry, APNU as a political party began to make these objections.
And did you raise the matter then with Mr. Lowenfield?
Certainly, because I had personal information on the matter. I immediately approached Mr. Keith Lowenfield and I said, we had this conversation about these documents. Of course, he accepted, he remembered, he said yes. GECOM, he received the documents. The documents are in the possession of GECOM and they are stored at Collingen as a location that GECOM apparently stores documents on the east coast of Demerara. They are in a container there. I then had an interaction with the press and they asked me about that same issue. I related my conversation, I told the whole story, beginning from elections night. I also recounted my conversation the day before with Mr. Keith Lowenfield at the recount center. The following day, Mr. Keith Lowenfield admonished me. He said to me that, he will stop having conversation with me because things that he says to me privately, I am repeating it to the press.
Certainly.
And I pointed out to him that that can be a private conversation. That's the nation's business. That's important statutory instruments that he should have custody over.
Sure.
Mr. Attorney,
Yes.
given this narrative that we are hearing from you about the statutory documents relating to this 40-odd ballot boxes from a particular voting area, would there be any substance to a contention that, given what you were told by both Mr. Mingo and Mr. Lowenfield and their acknowledgements, that these documents were missing?
They were never missing. They never left the custody of GECOM.
Thank you.
And you were given that assurance by the returning officer and the CEO, correct?
Yes.
And your party relied on that assurance.
Certainly. We didn't know that it was an issue.
Right. So let's go back to where we were. We were talking about the Holiday hearing. Now in paragraph 19 of your statement, you talk about the Chief Justice explaining in clear and simple language that the statements of poll must be the basis for the ascertainment process under Section 84 of the Representation of the People Act.
That's correct.
Now, when she explained this, can you tell us who was there?
The chairperson of the Elections Commission was there. The chief election officer was there. Mr. Mingo was there, and I believe all the commissioners were there.
Okay. And did the Chief Justice also say that persons present, and persons present are normally party agents and observers and so on, that persons present for that ascertainment process should be allowed a fair and reasonable opportunity to observe that process?
That's correct. In fact, the Chief Justice went at great length in explaining the different methods that can be used. She said that it can be, you can project it against a screen, you can hold it up, you can amplify an image, whatever methodology you use, the statement of poll must be the basis for the tabulation. Nothing other than the statement of poll, unless all the parties devise a mechanism and accept a transfer of data from the statement of poll to another document.
And did the parties agree
No,
to any-
certainly.
Okay, sorry.
You said the Chief Justice said that.
Yes, and she demonstrated
Was
that
that in the judgment?
in the judgment. It should be in the judgment, yes.
And when the process restarted, what did Mr. Mingo do?
After the court proceedings, court proceedings was in the morning of that day. I went back to Ashman's building, and there I was. I saw Mingo continuing the same thing, using a spreadsheet, supervising two female assistants, and they were doing the identical thing that the Chief Justice just told him not to do. We drew that to his attention, myself and Zulfikar Mustafa, and he stopped the exercise, and that was when they made a decision to move it from Ashman's building to GECOM headquarters at Kingston.
Okay. Can you recall contempt of court proceedings being brought?
Yes, we brought contempt of court proceedings. In fact, it is the contempt of court proceedings, the hearing of it, is where this, what I'm telling you, transpired.
Okay. Now, the contempt of court proceedings were brought against who?
It was filed in the rubric of the existing action, and the existing action was filed by Holidar against Mingo, the CEO, and GECOM.
Were these proceedings heard on the 13th of March 2020?
Yes, they were in the morning.
Sure. And was an explanation given to the RO about how that ascertainment exercise should?
Yes, that is what I just reported.
And what you told us earlier about him continuing with a spreadsheet is really after the contempt proceedings were heard,
Yes.
correct? Yes. So you wish to correct what we have here, or the version we have here?
Yes, certainly I made it necessary correction, if it is not set out in the chronology that I outlined just now.
Sure. So what you've just told us is the correct chronology?
Yes, yes.
Thank you. Well, when he began to use the spreadsheet, despite the fact that contempt proceedings had been brought and the Chief Justice of the country had told him that, listen, this is how you must proceed according to law, what did your party do?
Well, they changed the location and they moved it from Ashman Building to Kingston GECOM headquarters, and they implemented some new rules. They limited the number of persons who can now go in to participate, and they put up barriers so you couldn't even get close to the place anymore, and they erected a projection screen, and they began to project what they claim were the statements of poll. On that, it is styled, I think the press had it as a bed sheet.
Sure.
So they moved from spreadsheet to a bed sheet. and they projected what they claiming were statements of polls on that bed sheet.
Sure.
But
So-
nobody could verify because they situate the screen so far away from where the observers were seated that you couldn't see with your naked eye.
Correct. So we have evidence
You were
about
there,
that.
Mr. Attorney?
No, but we had photographs. I was outside. I couldn't go in. They limited the number of persons who could have entered.
So were fresh proceedings filed on the 14th of March 2020?
That night, that very night of the Friday, the 13th of March, Mr. Bingo made his second declaration, having concluded that tabulation exercise in the manner that I just described. So that's the 13th. On the 14th, we were in court again.
Yes.
We filed proceedings to set aside that declaration.
Sorry.
Second one.
I'm sorry.
The second declaration.
Commissioner has a question for you.
Yes, yes.
If I understand clearly, when Mr. Mingo made his first declaration, which was challenged, all the counting or tabulation had not been complete.
No,
Right, you went to court, you got the orders you got, and then they did it a second time around.
yes.
This second time around, as I understand it, they weren't doing it according to the statements of polls.
Yes.
But was the tabulation complete this time?
According to Mr. Bingo, he completed the tabulation.
What was the position of your party, that it wasn't complete?
But we were not able to see. Our observer team that were permitted there
Okay,
because of the
but when
distance.
you challenged it in court, was it on the basis
Of-
that
of-
the Chief Justice's directions were not followed?
That's correct.
Or that in addition to the fact that the tabulation was not complete?
That we challenged it that there was still non-compliance with now the Chief Justice ruling as well as Section 84 of the Representation of the People's Act. And that which purports to be a declaration by Mingo is a sham.
While you were in court on the 14th, did you receive information?
Yes, and that court, if I may, we were told that the High Court was fumigated and we had to go to a magistrate's court on the east bank of the Emerald on a Saturday to have this matter on. But that's just an aside.
So, no. Pause. So is it that there was trouble accessing courthouses?
I don't want to blame anyone, I'm just telling you what the facts were. We were informed that the High Court was fumigated and that the proceedings would be heard at the magistrate's court.
I see. So
And the proceedings were heard at the magistrate. The
I
High
see.
Court was
Not accessible.
not accessible, but all the officials moved to their credit, and I want to recognize that,
Sure.
to the magistrate's court.
So tell us what information you received
So,
on the 14th.
as the case was ongoing, I received notification from my political principals that an agreement that apparently was being worked on between the leader of the opposition and His Excellency the President, that agreement was consummated, brokered by the then chairperson of CARICOM, Prime Minister Motley. I informed the court, and the court gave us a few minutes to verify that that is so. The chairman of GECOM was there, all the commissioners were there. Contact was made with the CARICOM Secretariat. They confirmed, my principals confirmed, and well, the commissioners who are representing the government and the commission then claimed that they had no knowledge of such a thing.
Okay. Did GECOM take a decision on that day to conduct a national recount?
Well, the Chief Justice, because the proceedings were ongoing, had to make a decision what would Her Honor do with the proceedings, having regard to the time and importance. And she inquired of Justice Singh, who was present, what the position of GECOM would be on this issue. Justice Singh said that she reminded us of an undertaking that she had given to the High Court earlier to do a recount if the occasion requires it. And she indicated that she is summoning a meeting of GECOM that very afternoon, at which the issue will be discussed and hopefully they have consensus on the matter. Later that evening, I observed in the press reports coming out of GECOM that they discussed the matter and they agreed that a national recount would be done of all the ballots cast.
On the 17th of March 2020, were legal proceedings filed on behalf of someone called Yulita Moore?
So after this meeting, decided that the recount would be conducted, and this is, as I said, also a decision of the President and the Leader of the Opposition. Yulita Moore, who coincidentally was a candidate for the APNU AFC and their list of candidates, instituted legal proceedings challenging essentially the legality of the decision to recount.
So it was a challenge to GECOM's decision?
GECOM's decision, they were saying that it was not GECOM's decision, that it was a decision of a politician, and they were undermining the independence of GECOM, etc.
Okay, and this was litigated to the Court of Appeal, and the Court
This
of Appeal...
went from the High Court to the full court, then to the Court of Appeal, and eventually the Court of Appeal decided that it was lawful for GECOM to proceed with the recount.
And can you recall where this recount was going to take place?
GECOM decided to hold a recount at the Arthur Chung Convention Center on the east coast of Denmark.
Now, in your statement in paragraph 23, you say that certain actions were taken by GECOM, which you say were capable of frustrating the process of the recount, and you give some examples. Just very quickly, give us the examples you refer to.
Yes, so there was great sloth in transitioning from GECOM to the venue identified for the recount. They had to move all the containers containing the ballot boxes. That was a nightmare to get them to move that. Then to ready the place for the recount, to set up the stations, etc. But even before that, they fumigated the entire building and told us that no one can go in there for I don't know how many days or weeks and until they're certified by some public health expert, because at that time COVID had just entered Guyana in a big way.
Was there any reason for not using Ashman's building?
I don't know, it was purely GECOM's decision, and I can't speak to that.
Sure. Now, we know, we have evidence that there had been in Guyana local and international observers looking on, observing the process and making statements and so on after the 2nd of March 2020. Could you tell us what was the then government's position with respect to observers for the recount?
Well, naturally, international observers, they come to observe an election. They naturally would expect that within 2-3 days, 4 days perhaps, after that, their mandate would have expired. They would have made arrangements financially and otherwise for that time frame. Here it is that you have an election that is going on to, I don't know, 2 months now, and the results are not yet declared. This is unprecedented in any part of the globe.
Okay, did the then government object to the presence of national and international observers to the recount?
Yes, some of them had, I was trying to get there, that some
Right.
of them couldn't stay that long. They didn't have the arrangements in place, so they left with a view to coming back when the recount started.
Was one of these groups the
Carter Center, yes.
Observer Mission?
Yes, and Carter Center made made the fact that their request to return rejected a big issue, but they were not permitted to come.
Now you say in paragraph 24 of your statement that your party had asked that the process should be observed by the press or at least streamed live. Was this acceded to by GECOM?
No, we've always wanted a transparent process as possible, and a process that would have allowed for the widest and keenest possible scrutiny. We thought that the observers being there would provide that, as well as if the proceedings were streamed live. All of our requests were rejected.
Now, in paragraphs 25 to 27, you basically give us some details about a CARICOM team. Can you tell us who was the CARICOM team, what they were here for, and what they did?
CARICOM had appointed a special team to observe, and we welcomed that appointment. I think it was as an initiative of President Granger, I'm not sure, but I recall him describing the CARICOM team as the most legitimate interlocutor. I remember those words. But we supported the CARICOM team's involvement. At least we had some form of scrutiny over the process.
Was any reason given by then President Granger for the refusal of other observers, like the EU, OAS, Commonwealth?
I can't recall as I stand here.
Sure. Was a recount conducted?
Yes, as I indicated in my statement, GECOM unanimously, and I say unanimously because sometimes you hear, they decided to use a formula which they reduced into writing in the form of Order 60. They subsequently amended Order 60, and that became the code by which they decided to recount the ballots. It was done under a legislation that allows GECOM to exercise certain extraordinary powers when when Parliament is dissolved to address emergencies that may arise, difficulties that may arise in relation to an election process.
Did CARICOM's special observer team, I'm talking about this particular team, which was approved by the then president, did they do a report?
Yes, they observed, and in the end they presented a report of their observation.
Now, in your paragraphs 26 and 27, you tell us something about what the special observer team had found, but do you actually have a copy of that report?
Yes, I do, and
Will you be able to provide it to the Secretariat?
certainly I would.
And is the general information which you have referred to here, 26 and 27, based on
The report,
what was contained in
yes.
that document?
The report found that the recount process was done fairly, transparently, and the results reflected the ballots cast at the March 2nd elections, and they recommended that those results, the results generated by that recount process, should become the basis for the declaration of the final results.
So pause for a minute. So after the recount, just to use regular terms, who won?
The PPP won. Significantly, the recount results matched the results of the elections, other than matched the PPP statements of poll.
For the elections of the
Or
second.
statements of poll in the PPP's possession. I don't want to say PPP statements of poll because they're all GECOM statements of poll. But the statements of poll retained in the custody of the PPP matched almost number to number with the declared results, the results generated by the recount.
Sure.
As it matched every other declaration made by the returning officers for the 9 regions other than Mingo.
Thank you. AG, I know your evidence is taking some time, and if you wish to have something.
No, I'm fine.
You're okay?
Yes.
All right.
I'm taking it off of whichever
Sure.
permission can I?
Yeah.
No, you couldn't go ahead.
Okay, so I want to take you along to the 13th of June 2020. You refer to certain things done by the CEO.
What paragraph?
Paragraph 28.
Yes. Yes.
So you all, PPPC, recognizing that the recount essentially was matching the initial figures, did the CEO then engage in a process or give a report which reflected those figures?
No, he did not. He gave a report that
Would you like to look at your document?
yes,
Sure.
thank you, I'm looking at it. As I said before, the APNU AFC made a series of allegations which the CARICOM report, they were present, they assessed them and they rejected them as incredulous, baseless, and unsubstantiated.
Now,
Yes.
let's not walk that road. I'm trying to get you to the figures contained in paragraph 28.
Right, so among the allegations that were made by, very well. So the GECOM, the CEO, engaged in an exercise
And what was the outcome of that exercise?
where he reduced, and I have the figures here. He reduced 460,362 valid votes recounted to 185,270 by 60%, thereby disenfranchising 275,092 electors.
Now, according to his figures, because is it correct, is my understanding correct, that after all the returning officers provide their information to the CEO then advises the commission before the commission says who has won, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So the commissioners can't act unless they get a report from the
That's
CEO.
correct. And that is a statutory prescription, both under the Constitution as well as the ROPA, the Representation of the People's Act.
Right.
And it,
So according to what he did, what was the aggregate of votes for the APNU AFC?
so the APNU AFC, after that magical deduction by the CEO, ended up amassing 125,010 votes. 125,010 votes, and the PPP 56,627 votes.
So pause. So from what you have explained to us, basically the CEO appears to have reallocated his vote, the numbers, despite the report of the CARICOM Special Observer Team. Is that correct?
He did a little more than that because he explained what he did. He looked at, obviously, the observation reports which contain the allegations that I'm trying to refer to, made by the APNU AFC. And he determined those allegations and determined that they rendered invalid 275,000 electors. That's what he did.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Mr. Attorney, you say that he explained what he did.
Yes.
Where did this take place? Is it, you were there? Where did this take place?
It was-
Where he explained what he
It was public knowledge. He explained how he came up with these figures.
But that
Last
wasn't in
night
a
I was-
document. Was that in a document or anything?
It would have been in a document. Last night I read a press statement that my party would have issued in in which we spoke about how he arrived.
Yeah, but I'm interested
The official document?
in seeing firsthand where he explains this.
Well, he tendered a report, so that report should be the possession of GECOM.
I know he tendered the report.
And that report has a breakdown.
Yes, but did he explain why he made the deductions and so on?
He explained that he interpreted that those were invalid votes.
In the report he says so.
Yes.
One
So
more,
he counted what he determined to be valid votes.
one more question. I'm just curious and I'm not inviting you to speculate. Did he at any point say from whence came his authority to do so?
No. The courts pronounced it, because all these matters were challenged, as you will hear. And the courts, I think one court described him as that he done the cap of an investigator, judge, and executor all in one. And I think the CCJ admonished him that he is not a lone ranger. Those words still ring in my head.
Now,
But was there a pronouncement by the court that he had no authority to do what he did?
Yes, several courts so pronounced. It's not one time he did this, as the story goes on. He did this about 4 times.
I'm just wondering if Phil, it's not highly relevant, but obviously his actions are under scrutiny. And I'm wondering if he offered anything that would show that he misinterpreted the law, he was relying on something, and thought he had the authority to do so.
I can speculate as to why he did so, but
No,
I
don't
don't know.
speculate.
So I can't.
All right.
What I do know is that this was not his first election. He presided over 2 previous elections and he got it right.
Thank you.
I don't have much longer. Now, just in paragraphs 28 going down to 34, essentially, of your statement, essentially you refer to the fact that during the period of time from the 13th of June 2020 to the 9th of July 2020, the CEO produced various reports to GECOM, and these were not accepted by GECOM, correct?
That's correct, because GECOM instructed him to use the results generated by Order 60, the recount process, aggregate those results and bring those results, and he repeatedly refused to do so.
And did the CEO provide any reason to the public or the citizens of Guyana as to why he was refusing to do what the commissioners of GECOM were asking him to do?
No. In the meanwhile, there were court proceedings being filed.
Okay,
by,
so
okay.
let's get to that. So we know that the CEO first prepared a report on the 13th of June 2020, and this was not accepted by the GECOM commissioners. He was directed to go back and prepare a report.
That's correct.
Before he presented his second report, did any court proceedings begin?
Yes.
Briefly, could you tell us? It's paragraph 29 of
Eslin David, APNU supporter, filed proceedings, and they commenced proceedings in the Court of Appeal, I think, in which they asked the court to determine certain words in Article 177 of the Constitution. The words were, I believe, what is meant by more votes. And the challenge was upheld quickly, if I may go on, by the Court of Appeal.
Was this by a unanimous decision?
No, by a majority of 2 to 1.
And
That-
after this, did the CEO produce another report?
Yes, using the Court of Appeal now as his validator, he did another calculation by which he discounted a further 115,844 more votes, disqualified them, throw them out as invalid, and come up with a different formula.
Okay.
Result.
Did GECOM then accept this new
No.
figure?
No, GECOM did not accept that report, and by that time, we had filed proceedings, an appeal of Eslin David Court of Appeal ruling to the Caribbean Court of Justice.
What was the outcome of that?
The outcome of that was very illuminating. They outlined what the powers of GECOM are, what the powers of the CEO are, that he can only act in accordance with GECOM, that they pronounced on the validity of Order 60. They found that Order 60 was properly promulgated. They found nothing wrong with the results generated by the recount. And they basically ordered that the result generated by the recount be used as the basis for the report to be prepared, and that should be the basis for the declaration of the results that are to be finally declared.
Was this on the
And
8th?
they vacated and rescinded Low and Field's reports.
Was this decision of the CCJ on the 8th of July 2020
That's correct, it's in writing, and it's one of the judgments that I will lay over
that you will
subsequently.
produce to the Secretariat? Now, on the 9th of July, the chairperson of GECOM wrote to the CEO asking now, having had the CCJ decide on these matters, that he produce a report.
Yes,
And is it correct to say that he finally submitted a report on the, he submitted another report
yes,
on the 11th of July 2020?
that's correct.
Was this report based on the numbers of the recount?
No, so you have the highest court of the land guiding the CEO, telling him that he's wrong, vacating his report, telling him how he should go about preparing his report, and yet the gentleman does otherwise. He then uses the 10 declaration of the returning officers, ignoring completely the results generated by the recount, and use that as the basis to prepare his report, including the deprecated, impugned
Pause a second, AG,
Mingo
because
statement.
pause a second. This is an important aspect of it. So when you talk about him using the declarations for the 10 regions, does it mean that one of the declarations he used was the declaration that Mr. Mingo had made on the incomplete count for District 4?
I believe he used the one Mingo made on the 13th of March.
Correct. Thank you. Now, did the chairman of GECOM accept those results?
No, once again, GECOM rejected the results.
And did the CEO eventually produce a report based on the recount figures on the 14th of July 2020?
I believe that there were other proceedings filed again.
Yes, but let's just go finish this line of thought.
Because
Did he eventually, sir,
yeah,
did he eventually produce a correct report using the recount on the 14th of July 2020?
yes,
Good. But before this had occurred, you were about to tell us
that
that
although the CCJ pronounced that the CEO is always subject to the direction of GECOM. In Messenger Jones, the last proceeding that they filed, they sought orders, they claimed declarations that the GECOM, the chairperson of GECOM, was not complying with the direction of the CEO. They reversed the law upside down. And they asked for declarations to that effect.
and what became of that meritorious application?
It was dismissed both in the High Court as well as in the Court of Appeal.
And was it appealed?
It
Well,
was not-
it was appealed and the appeal was dismissed?
Yes, it was not appealed beyond the Guyana Court of Appeal,
Okay.
fortunately.
And is it correct to say that on the 2nd of August is when the CEO submitted his final report to GECOM?
It's when he submitted his first lawful report.
Okay. And is it on that day that GECOM's commission was able to finally declare the results of the elections of the 2nd of March 2020?
That's correct, because the CEO used the results generated by the recount.
Thank you, Commissioners. These are my questions.
Mr. Torney,
Yes, sir.
I gather from your evidence today that in the tabulation process,
I think should have been need to tender certain documents.
Yes, but I can wait until after the questions if the commission would allow me.
that in relation to the tabulation process being conducted by GECOM officials, we had first in the case of the returning officer for District 4, Mr. Mingo, we had his, from your evidence, deliberate refusal to comply with the guidance and directions of the court, particularly the Chief Justice. And we have evidence from the chairperson of GECOM presented to us that the commission gave express instructions to Mr. Mingo to use the statements of poll in the tabulation exercise. And then we have, from your evidence, deliberate non-compliance by the Chief Elections Officer with the directions of the court and acting in excess of his statutory authority. That was the scenario leading to the eventual declaration of the result for the 2020 elections.
That's correct, sir.
Finally, I believe it was from a witness named Yearwood that we heard that Mr. Mingo signed a declaration together with, I believe, a representative of a political party. Would you know anything about that?
I know that one of the declarations that was made on the 5th of March, and which bears Mr. Mingo's signature, also bears what appears to be the signature of Walter Lawrence, senior member of the APNU-AFC coalition, and who was then a sitting minister of government.
Are you aware of any provision of the law that permitted that to happen?
No, I'm not.
Thank you.
Just out of curiosity, the second challenge to Mr. Mingo's, the challenge to Mr. Mingo's second purported declaration,
Yes,
which was on the way when you got word
yes.
that an agreement had been reached for a national recount. What ultimately became of that proceeding?
It didn't go beyond that.
It fell away.
It fell away because the mischief that it was intended to address was being remedied by the recount.
Thank you.
That's a better formulation.
Just one question. The about the declaration made by Mingo?
Which one of them?
The one that he made on the 5th?
5th of March, yes.
Yes. What became of that? Where is that document?
That was eventually vacated, I believe, by the Chief Justice at the conclusion of Hologar, the case Hologar.
Which decisions you're going to make?
Which decisions we are going to make.
Okay.
And that is why he had to do the second declaration.
So I forgot to ask you about something. You told us about the Carter Center, being one group of international observers for the March 2020 elections.
Yes.
Are you aware that the Carter Center produced a report about those elections?
Yes.
And have you provided copies of those reports for
Yes,
us,
yes.
which you have initialed?
Yes.
And if you see a copy, will you be able to identify it as the report which you have obtained?
Certainly.
I think its initial is on this page. Yeah, sure.
It is my initial.
I'm asking that this be admitted as MAN1A, and I do have copies for the commissioners.
I can inquire whether you have the observer reports of the other observations.
Yes, they are. They are already exhibited.
And the CARICOM special team that observes.
We don't have that, and we will rely on you to produce it to
Certainly.
the Secretariat.
I will.
Do we have an evidence to one of the OAS led by former Prime Minister Russell?
We do. That was put in through the witness, Rosalina Russell. Commissioners, thank you. These are my questions for the Honorable Attorney General.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kinney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Commissioners. Thank you very much. I hope that I've been of assistance.
You have.
Thank you.
This landlord be final witness in public hearings.
Yes, indeed.
That's all you have?
Yes, that is it.
That is
And
it, there's no more.
no more for the day or at
Well,
all.
or total,
Or
yes.
at all.
We
So,
resume at 9:30.
So this
Yes.
brings us to the end of the public hearings. This commission of inquiry. We continue tomorrow morning at 9:30. One moment, please. You're just wondering how regard some plans so that we could start until what do you think if we start at 9?
if we start at 9, I don't really see myself going beyond 11.
Okay.
Worst case scenario, 11.
That's fine. Commission now stands adjourned until tomorrow morning at 9.